In a Louisiana hotel lobby in 1969, 11-year-old Michael Jackson heard his father say, "We have reservations." The receptionist went silent and looked back at 20 empty keys hanging on the wall. Wait, because the 30 seconds between Joseph following that gaze, saying, "I understand," and the 4 words he told Michael while walking to the car ended Michael's childhood. And 25 years later, when he returned to stand in front of that hotel, the 3 words he said proved the trauma never left. The Louisiana heat pressed down on the parking lot like a hand. Michael sat in the back seat of the van, watching condensation slide down the window. His brothers were talking about the show they'd just finished, voices high with leftover adrenaline. But Michael wasn't listening. He was watching his father walk toward the hotel entrance, shoulders square, briefcase in one hand. They'd been on the road for 6 weeks. Motels, diners, gymnasiums converted into concert venues, then back on the highway. Michael's body ached in places he didn't know could ache. His throat was raw from singing through 3 shows in 2 days. But none of that mattered when Joseph said they'd be staying in a real hotel tonight. A place with clean sheets, a shower that worked, maybe even a television. Michael watched his father disappear through the glass doors. The van was getting stuffy. Jermaine cracked a window. "Think they got a pool?" Marlon asked. "It's Louisiana in July," Tito said. "They better have a pool." Michael pressed his forehead against the glass. Through the hotel's front window, he could see his father at the reception desk. A woman stood behind it, middle-aged, hair pulled back tight. Joseph was talking, gesturing to a piece of paper, probably the reservation confirmation their manager had called ahead with. "Look at what happens when you think everything's going to be normal." The receptionist was looking at something. Not the paper Joseph was holding, something behind her. Joseph leaned forward slightly, the way he did when he was trying to stay polite but was getting impatient. Michael saw his father's shoulders change. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you didn't know Joseph Jackson, didn't live with the man, didn't spend every day reading his moods to know whether to speak or stay silent. But Michael saw it. The shoulders dropped half an inch. The briefcase shifted from his right hand to his left. "Something's wrong," Michael said. His brothers stopped talking. Through the window, Joseph was stepping back from the counter. The receptionist wasn't moving, just standing there, hands folded in front of her. Joseph stood there for 3 full seconds, then turned and walked back toward the doors. When he came through, his face was blank, the kind of blank that meant something had happened, but he wasn't going to talk about it yet. "Get back in," Joseph said. "We're not staying here." "What?" Jermaine sat up. "Why not?" Joseph opened the driver's door, slid behind the wheel. "They don't have rooms." "But we had a reservation," Tito said. Joseph started the engine. Michael looked back at the hotel. Through the window, the receptionist was still standing in the same place, hands still folded, and on the wall behind her, hanging on a wooden board with little numbered hooks, were the room keys. Michael counted them, 20 keys, maybe more. The hotel was 2 stories. He could see the building from where they were parked. 40 rooms, give or take, and 20 keys on the wall meant 20 empty rooms. Notice what a child sees when adults think he's not paying attention. "Dad," Michael said quietly, "the keys are on the wall." Joseph's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I saw them," Joseph said. His voice was flat. "Get your seatbelts on." They drove in silence for 10 minutes. Michael watched the landscape roll by, trees and gas stations and hand-painted signs for farm equipment. The air conditioning wasn't working right, and the van was hot, but nobody complained. Nobody said anything. Finally, Joseph pulled into a rest stop. It was empty except for a semi-truck parked at the far end. He cut the engine and sat there, both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. "Dad?" Marlon's voice was small. Joseph didn't answer right away. He looked at the dashboard, the steering wheel, anywhere but at his son's. Then he opened his door and stepped out. Michael watched him walk a few steps away, hands in his pockets, head down. Michael unbuckled his seatbelt and climbed out. "Michael, wait!" Jermaine started, but Michael was already closing the door behind him. The heat hit him immediately, thick and wet. Cicadas were screaming in the trees. Michael walked over to where his father stood, at the edge of the parking lot where the asphalt met the grass. "Dad?" Joseph looked down at him. For a moment, Michael saw something in his father's face he'd never seen before, something that looked like tiredness but deeper than that, older. "You saw the keys," Joseph said. "Yes." "You want to know why she said they didn't have rooms?" Michael nodded. Joseph crouched down so they were at eye level. He put his hands on Michael's shoulders. His grip was firm, the way it was when he was about to say something important. "Because we're black." The words hung in the air between them. A truck passed on the highway behind them, kicking up dust. Michael had heard the word before. He'd heard it in Gary and Chicago, in conversations that adults had when they thought children weren't listening. He'd heard it in songs and news reports about marches and protests, in the way his mother talked about her childhood, in the warnings his father gave before they walked into certain neighborhoods. But he'd never had it applied to him directly, like this, as the reason for something that had just happened, as the explanation for why his father's shoulders had dropped, why they were standing in a rest stop parking lot instead of a hotel room with clean sheets. "But we're famous," Michael said. The words came out before he could stop them. "People know who we are. We're on the radio. We're going to be on television." Joseph's jaw worked. He looked at Michael with an expression that was part sadness, part something harder. To her, we're just black. That's all she needed to know. "But no buts, Michael." Joseph's voice was gentle but final. "You need to understand this now. You're 11 years old, and you're going to be famous. More famous than you are now, if things keep going the way they're going. But there are people who will never see past your skin. They'll see you on television, they'll buy your records, they'll scream your name at concerts, and then they'll see you standing in their lobby, and all they'll see is a black man asking for a room." Michael felt something crack inside his chest. It wasn't anger yet, it was confusion, the kind that comes when the world shows you a rule you didn't know existed. "What do we do?" he asked. "We leave," Joseph said. "We find somewhere else." "But what if everywhere's like that?" Joseph stood up, looked down the highway. "Then we sleep in the van." Wait, because this is the moment Michael learned that talent doesn't protect you. They slept in the van that night. Joseph drove until he found a rest stop with bathrooms and a water fountain. They pulled blankets from the back, pushed the seats down, made spaces for 5 bodies in a vehicle built for cargo. The windows stayed cracked for air, but it was still hot. Michael lay awake, listening to his brothers breathe, watching the way the highway lights flickered through the trees every time a car passed. He kept seeing the receptionist's face, the blank politeness, the way she'd looked at Joseph like he was a problem that would go away if she just stayed still long enough, the way her hands had stayed folded, the way she hadn't even glanced at the reservation paper Joseph had tried to show her. She hadn't needed to look. She'd made her decision the moment they walked through the door. Michael wondered if she'd looked at the keys after they left, if she'd counted them, if she'd felt anything at all. Probably not. Remember this feeling, because Michael never forgot it. In the morning, they washed their faces in the rest stop bathroom and ate crackers from a box Jermaine had saved from a gas station 2 days ago. Nobody talked about the hotel. They got back on the highway, drove to the next venue, set up for that night's show. Michael performed like nothing had happened. He sang every note, hit every step. The crowd screamed. They reached for him. They loved him. And when he walked off stage, sweat-soaked and exhausted, he looked at his father and saw the same tired expression from the parking lot. "Good show," Joseph said. Michael nodded. They stayed in venues for the next 3 nights. Storage. Rooms, janitor's closets, anywhere with 4 walls and a door that locked. The promoters didn't ask questions. They'd seen this before. On the 4th night, they found a motel outside Baton Rouge that had a black owner. The rooms were small and the carpet was worn, but the man at the desk smiled when they walked in and said, "Y'all must be those Jackson boys I heard about." Michael felt something loosen in his chest. They stayed 2 nights. Michael slept in a real bed, took a hot shower, watched television until his eyes burned. On the 2nd morning, the owner's wife made them breakfast, eggs and grits and toast with butter that melted into every corner. She sat with them while they ate and told them about her own children, about the church choir they sang in, about the dream she had for them. "You boys are going to be something," she said, looking right at Michael. "Don't let anybody tell you different." Michael wanted to tell her about the hotel in Louisiana, about the keys on the wall, about the blank politeness on the receptionist's face, but he didn't. He just nodded and said, "Thank you, ma'am." When they left, the woman hugged each of them. Joseph shook her hand, held it a moment longer than necessary, and said something Michael couldn't hear. The woman nodded, patted Joseph's arm, and watched them load into the van. "Listen, because kindness after cruelty hits different." They kept touring. The Jackson 5 got bigger. Songs climbed charts. Venues grew from gymnasiums to arenas. Michael turned 12, then 13, then 14. The hotels got nicer. The rejection got quieter, more subtle. A miscommunication about reservations, a system error that somehow only affected their booking. But Michael never forgot Louisiana. Years later, in 1993, after finishing the Dangerous tour, the The bus route took them through the same stretch of highway. Michael was 34. The world knew his name. He'd sold more records than almost anyone alive. He'd played for presidents and royalty. He told the driver to stop. They pulled into the same hotel parking lot. The building looked different. New paint, updated sign, a renovation that had modernized the facade. But Michael knew it was the same place. Same shape, same position from the highway. He stepped out of the bus. The security team followed at a distance, confused but alert. Michael walked through the front doors into the lobby. The layout had changed. Different desk, different carpet, different receptionist, younger, friendlier, with a smile that reached her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I was here once," Michael said. "A long time ago." "Oh?" The woman's smile widened. "Are you visiting again? Would you like a room?" Michael looked past her that the wall where the keys used to hang was gone, replaced by a computer system and a painted mural of Louisiana landmarks. Everything had been erased, remodeled, replaced. He thought about his father's hands on his shoulders, about sleeping in the van, about the blank politeness that had taught him the world worked differently than he'd thought. "No," Michael said quietly. "I just wanted to see if I remembered it right." The receptionist looked confused, but she was still smiling. "Well, welcome back anyway. You staying in town?" "No," Michael said. "Not here." He turned and walked back to the bus. The security team exchanged glances but said nothing. Michael climbed the steps, sat in his usual seat, looked out the window at the hotel entrance. "You good?" someone asked. Michael nodded, but his throat was tight. 24 years had passed. He was one of the most famous people on the planet. He'd transcended race in ways the 11-year-old version of himself could never have imagined. He'd broken barriers, shattered records, changed the industry. And still, standing in that lobby, all he'd felt was 11 years old again, watching his father's shoulders drop, counting keys on a wall. Notice how trauma doesn't care about success. The bus pulled back onto the highway. Michael watched the hotel disappear in the side mirror. One of his dancers came and sat across from him, asked if everything was okay. Michael said yes. He was good at saying yes when people asked, good at smiling, at deflecting, at keeping things moving. But later that night, in his hotel room in the next city, a 5-star place where the staff knew his name and his preferences and fell over themselves to accommodate his requests, Michael stood at the window and thought about that day in 1969. He was 34 now. He'd lived more than twice as long since that parking lot conversation. He'd become everything his father had pushed him to become, and more. He'd broken every barrier, shattered every record, changed the entire industry. But standing at that window, looking out at a city he couldn't name, Michael finally understood something his father had been trying to teach him that day in the parking lot. The world will love what you do and hate who you are, all at the same time. It will scream your name and close its doors. It will buy your music and count its keys. Michael put his hand flat against the window glass. It was cold, and he was alone, and somewhere in Louisiana there was a hotel that had forgotten what it had done. But Michael hadn't forgotten. Children never forget the moments they learn the world is smaller than they thought, crueler than it should be, and that their parents can't protect them from everything. He'd spent his whole life trying to build a world where kids like the one he used to be wouldn't have to learn those lessons. Neverland, charity work, hospitals and orphanages and foundations, making sure children felt seen, felt valued, felt like they mattered, because he knew what it felt like to count keys on a wall while someone pretended they couldn't see you. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think. The morning after Michael's bus left Louisiana, a journalist tracked down the story of his stop. The hotel owner, who hadn't worked there in 1969 and had no knowledge of what had happened, issued a statement saying the establishment welcomed everyone and always had. The story made regional news, then disappeared. But Michael never spoke about it publicly. He didn't need to. The people who understood what that moment meant, the ones who'd lived through similar experiences, already knew. And the ones who didn't understand wouldn't, no matter how many words he used. Some stories don't need explaining. They just need witnesses. And if you're wondering what Michael whispered standing in front of that hotel in 1994, his security guard later said it was 3 words, spoken so quietly he almost missed them. I never forgot.